Now, I just finished one with Dr. Farah Banani and Dr. Anjali Vedati, and those are microbiology professors, right? So this is an intro to microbiology class, and we go, what are we going to do? What we ended up doing was talking about, well, what we started thinking about were the learning objectives. And we started to look at information and technology literacy and how students need to understand that test results are fallible. And sometimes you get more information, you have to build on it, and then continue on. Plus, we absolutely wanted to put them in the epistemic community. And boy, this is going to be a alliteration of epidemiology. So what we made them for was we created a fake Colorado Department of Illness Prevention, okay? And we put up a website, and we made it look like the CDC website, the same blue and white, the same kind of boring. We checked the font and the text. We made it the same, right? And we went, well, maybe they can be like interns for the state. And, oh, I wonder, how would we make this? Well, then we look up, and the CDC has epidemiology interns. So we went to the we looked at what they did, we moderated it, we scaled it down quite a bit. But what we ended up saying was I went into the class, and I went in as the technology person, and I was introduced, and we told the students that they were a part of a technology grant, and that what they would be doing is that they would be testing a new way of learning. And this new way of learning was we were going to look at cold cases. So cold cases of epidemic, of cases of possible global origins of diseases. And our college is located near some bus stops. We're in Denver. There was enough that made it that somebody could get off a plane, take a bus to our campus, and be patient zero in a big global epidemic. So the students, these were cold cases that were sitting in the Colorado Department of Illness Prevention, but they might have global origins, and no one had the time to investigate these so far. So instead, we were going to give them to the microbiology students, and they would do their best to investigate what it was. So this was our Project Outbreak. So Project Outbreak had, over Google Hangout, our director of special projects showing up, giving the students a cold case. It looked a lot like Carmen Sandiego. And the students would then have to go on our campus and investigate where the origins globally for this case might be. And are there any additional tests that should be run on whatever cultures were left? Was there anything specific that should be looked at? And we had a constant discussion about what more information is needed. What decisions do you have to make before you're not going to have complete information. So what do you need to work on? And that's how we did Project Outbreak. We went with, okay, so what countries are we going to decide on first? Our first case was a food poisoning that we and the great thing about food poisoning is, I'm sorry, the great thing about food poisoning, let me take this back. Okay, sometimes when you get food poisoning and if it affects you badly, sometimes there's memory loss. So the patient had some memory loss, so he couldn't recall what he ate over the last 2 days. So we rolled out the information. So at first, all they got was the security footage and just some basic information. Then the lab results were found, and then they were sent there, right? And then, they had to come up with questions that the chief investigator on this was willing to go and ask the patient, and the patient had no recall, but he had these pictures of food on his phone, and so those pictures of food on his phone got sent back, and the student had to investigate it, and we ended up, and the result was that there was some botulism poisoning at this Russian Eastern European shop, and they tracked it down to there based on all the clues and the things that they had to figure out. And we continued throughout this to give them, you know, different information, like a welt on a leg. Could this be West Nile virus? Oh, but wait, it could also be this, and it could be this, and it could be this. And the different student groups had to, you know, were assigned the different countries to investigate the breakouts. And all the while on our website, we had the CDC, we had the RSS feed from the CDC showing up. So this kept showing up as the students had to go in and look at it. And we constantly had the students going and looking at the CDC and the World Health Organization and going back and looking, well, this case was from 6 months ago or a year ago. What was happening then? What could this possibly be? What could be the misdiagnosis? So the epistemic frame we put the students in was they were epidemiology interns with the Colorado Department of Illness Prevention, and this was just a pilot to see if you could use microbiology students to help clear some of these cases. So that's how we did that one.
All right, and so some examples for me. One of the first things we did was what we called, we dubbed Chris's Cucina's Consulting. Basically what it was is it was an alternate reality game we developed because we were looking at what are some of the pain and problems, and actually for all of all classes, this was for an accounting class. And so we're looking at, so what is a common pain or problem for our students? And one of the big areas that our students struggle with is an area of accounting called activity-based accounting. And that really what it is it's basically looking at the operations of a business and breaking every activity that someone does during the course of that business. So every little activity that they do and bringing it out into what are called cost pools. So the idea is you take every action that you have, and every action will either generate a cost or a revenue. And so it's identifying all of these and then mixing them in and creating pools. So basically what we did is we went, okay, so how do we make this more digestible for our students? And so one of the things we started looking at is, well, what does everybody do? Well, everyone has to eat. So we were like, okay, so well, it's fun. So you're okay, well, what's fun? So everyone's like, well, we like food. So everyone around us were foodies, and we were like, okay, sure, let's make it about food. And the interesting thing is the time we were developing this, the economy was going through a downturn, and there were a lot of different restaurants that were closing around in our area. And so we were like, well, there's our storyline. There's our storyline, because a lot of the different economic development groups out there were trying to help support local businesses and how to keep them alive. And so what we did is we went ahead and we said, okay, so here's what you guys are going to do. So we looked at their different learning objectives. So it was learning what activity-based costing is and how to apply it. And so basically we laid out a framework for that, and we made a lot of their reporting pieces to be related to activity-based costing and different aspects of that process. And so we had them then basically go ahead and say, congratulations, you are all now consultants for the Broomfield Economic Development Chamber, Broomfield Economic Development Group. And their job is to create a report and review one eatery, one area in your area that basically and do a review on the restaurant and why is it being successful, why is it not being successful, look at the different activities that the restaurant is engaged in, look at some common costs, look at common expenses, what are they struggling with from your observation, what is sort of their process and procedure that they have. And so basically what we did is we sort of created all this together, and we had them go around, and it was fun because we actually brought in guest speakers. And actually, they were delivered on a mobile platform. So as they got close to specific locations, we also mapped out. We also created a map. So they had to go to point 1 to get a clue to go to point 2 to go to point 3. And so we actually sort of guided them around the area. And what was really cool is each of these different places, the platform we used allow us to go ahead and put a video into it. And so what we did is we have our actors who are actually just our friends. Who basically dressed up for the occasion and cosplayed, and sometimes we did have some real live actual people who actually did the job. Otherwise, it was just other instructors who are role playing, and basically they gave them different clues and gave them different information and had them bounce around from different place to different place, and then that was sort of getting them ready and getting them set up to things that you should look for, so sort of priming the pump. And then they went out and they chose the restaurant that they wanted to go ahead and visit. And then they had to go ahead and report their progress, tweet out their observations, and do different things like that, and then come back and do reporting for it. So another game we developed was we were looking at an issue where students were struggling, again, in accounting, we're struggling with the idea of internal control. And internal control is basically every business owner has to protect their assets. And what internal control is it's the different policies and procedures you develop as a business to limit people's access to your important assets in your business, like, say, cash. People can't really, you don't want everybody in the world to have access to all the money in your business. Only certain people are allowed to sign contracts and different things like that. So what we did is at that point in time, we're trying, okay, we need to have them try to figure out a system, and we want to have them look at, now, what are some of the, we want them to champion the systems, but we also want them to look at, well, what's the flip side? So what happens if you're too strict? So if it's too hard for people to actually be able to sign, if only one person in your entire company can sign a contract, well, what happens if your company gets thousands of contracts a day? It's kind of hard for one person to sign off on all of them. So we started looking at that, and then we went, okay, now next thing is we want to find something that really would resonate with the students. And at that time, it just so happened that there was a certain individual by the name of D.B. Cooper who was in the news because the FBI had, again, never found this D.B. Cooper, and they were reopening the file to try to get more, finally solve this crime that happened in the 1970s. And so basically that's when it all started taking shape. Is we went, okay, so we did it under a D.B. Cooper storyline. And so again, we formed teams, and again, we had them look at and going, okay, so here's the thing. You can either, there's several options. You can either look at how would you, if you were D.B. Cooper, how would you spend the money? If you're a relative of D.B. Cooper and you got to share the money, how would you go about spending the money to go ahead and make sure that you weren't caught? And the other option was you would go ahead and you would create, you would basically look at how would you, if you were the Internal Revenue Service, or the Secret Security, or if you were Secret Service, sorry, or if you were in looking at the Treasury, how would you develop controls to make sure you could catch someone spending the money that was taken? Because the interesting thing about D.B. Cooper is all the case files were out there. So you could actually go to the FBI website and download all of the documentation. And it was awesome because, like, it was everything that you would think about, because they actually had people's notes, the police notes, the police observations. They were all wrinkled, they were yellowed, they were, really old. You could see the aging process. A bunch of them had like coffee rings on them, where someone, put their coffee cup on top of the file. And then the other piece to it, we got even more fun because we actually got one group who played they basically created an accounting firm. So each group created their own little accounting firm, and then we had them send basically bids or proposals, call for proposals. We had them write up and submit it, and actually their material was sent to a criminal justice class who was using the D.B. Cooper case as a way to get students to experience case management and to learn how to handle a case and learn how to handle files. And so we collaborated on that, and then basically we had the accounting students serve as accounting consultancy firms, that the criminal justice students were forming sort of private agents, private detectives, or they were being part of a detective squad in a police department, and their job was to work with an outside consultant, bring in expertise, because they didn't have the accounting expertise, and then bring them in and ask them questions related to the case. So the accounting students learned to handle it from a how do I act like a CPA? How do I act like an accounting professional and answer people's questions about accounting and taxation, and how businesses operate? And then also the criminal justice side was, well, how do I work with an outside consultant? And so they went back and forth, and the only communication they had was via generic emails that they sent up in Gmail. So they created their own firm email in Gmail. They also had a different project management software that the criminal justice students could actually assign projects to the consultancies, and so basically a ticketing system. So then the accounting students would respond to them in a timely fashion. And so that was another interesting experience for them because they really had no clue. We kept the separation that the students did not realize it was two groups of students who were talking to each other and doing it. Now, the benefit of it was that the criminal justice class was all the way up in Colorado, was all the way up near the Wyoming border in Fort Collins, and the accounting class was down in Denver. And so there was a geographic difference between the two. So really the only way they could communicate was asynchronously through that. And so it actually was really an exciting way to utilize an alternative reality piece to this. And so they went ahead and did that. And so it was really funny because one of the teams, as everyone knows, some people can be more apathetic than others. We actually had an accounting student group were frustrated because the other group was really not giving them information that they could act on in a timely fashion. So they weren't like asking them questions, or they would ask the questions before, like right before the deadline or different things like that, and try to get a response. And so in some of these cases, the students had maybe like 4 hours to respond, which is ridiculous. And I was like going, so we had a big discussion about what was really cool. The accounting class, we had a big discussion about going, well, you know, sometimes there are customers that just aren't worth it. You know, sometimes there's customers that you have that they cause more problems than they're worth, and so actually we talked about, well, how do you let a client go, or how do you back out of the contract? So they could exit it very easily, and so what happened is we actually ended up having an accounting firm agonize over this piece, and then eventually they decided that it was in their best interest to fire. to basically just bow out and saying, no, unfortunately, I don't believe we can meet your minimum time requirements. And so they actually had to come up with a letter, a very formal letter, and they sent the letter to the criminal justice students, which made them very very ashamed of what they did. And so I mean, it was kind of interesting how you had this sort of peer, you know, this peer regulation, peer policing going on.
Okay, so concerns and issues if you're doing an alternate reality game. The first concern that I've heard from teachers when they're thinking about doing this is, won't this take a lot of time? Okay, and here's the thing about it. First of all, don't do this alone, okay? Grab your friends, grab your beverage of choice, whether it be coffee or whatever else, and sit down and start with the story with a bunch of your friends who might also happen to be educators, and start thinking about what would be a great story for this. I mean, you wouldn't have come to this point already if you didn't already have your student learning objectives about what you wanted them to learn. Okay? Then think about what's the story that can go along with this. And that's one of the biggest issues and concerns, just getting started. Don't do this alone. Grab fellow educators who are enthusiastic. Grab friends. Talk to your librarians. Your librarians, when they hear about what you're doing, chances are they will want to be involved in some way or form. I mean, for us, when we've been doing ARGs, we continually get the librarians going, send them down to us. Send them down. Can I come into your classroom? I'll play one of the roles. And you just start getting people involved. So this isn't all on you. I mean, share the fun. Share the fun with other people. Now, the next thing I would say about thinking about an alternate reality game, this isn't something that really, if you want to have students role play something in a classroom for one period, fine, then call it that. You're not going to put the same kind of effort into it. A real ARG really does go through the process of making it seem, it's something called TINAG. This is not a game. That you really go and make sure that it's authentic. It's a community of practice. It's not make-believe. It's you are making sure every element is there to get as authentic as possible, to give students the challenge and the mystery, and also making sure that there's transferable skills. So if you just want them to role play, that's perfectly fine, but that isn't the depth that you normally get into an alternate reality game. A couple other issues and concerns: making sure you're ready if they don't get a clue. Making sure that you're ready to jump in. Making sure that they have a way of letting you know if they are really stumped. Now, sometimes they could be really stumped, and you go, this is part of the learning process, and you let them go. Other times it might be, wow, I really was not explicit there. It's really difficult for anyone to find that piece, and so let me add something in additional. And this is just you being a good teacher. This is you doing formative assessment. This is you helping you close the loop.
Play some arcs. Actually go out and play something. So you get a feel for some of the mechanics that are there. A really easy one that's out there, if you're a mobile user, is Ingress. INGRESS. Ingress is a really easy game for you to get a good feel for what is a mobile alternate reality game.